All right, YouTube. This is Detroit's HPTV coming to you out of Detroit. I have a serious topic or an interesting topic. And the question that we asking today is the Bible being used to justify genocide and ethnic cleansing in the war over there in the Middle East? This is a question because we know that they used at one time the Bible to justify putting black people in slavery because they said they were descendants of Ham. We were cursed people. And the Christians justified enslaving us based on that. This is a reaction video to something I seen. It's real interesting. And look how the Old Testament, how they twisting the Bible in these modern times to justify certain things that's going on. This is for fair usage, commentary, educational purposes. Y'all check this out. Listen closely what this guy says.
Is the Israeli government calling for the genocide of the people of Gaza, for the Palestinians? Now, I ask this question because I saw just now really a video of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu talking about biblical text. He says, "You must remember what the Amalek has done to you," says our Bible. And this is quite significant because in the Bible, we have calls for the genocide of the Amalekites in a number of passages. And I wanted to share with you some expert testimony about these passages from a leading historian based in the United States discussing these passages, and they're extraordinarily troubling and disturbing, mainly for Christians and Jews who are not aware of them, even though they're in their Bibles. But first, I'd like to share with you, it's from Sky News. It was broadcast yesterday when Benjamin Netanyahu, talking about the so-called ground operation that's going into Gaza, explicitly saying to people, remember what Amalekite has done to you, says our Holy Bible. Who are the Amalekites? This really matters because many people might well see this as a call.
I'm going to stop there before I continue. Now, when Benjamin Netanyahu uses the Bible, he's appealing to the Christians because his people don't read the Bible, they read the Torah. So lately, since Europe has been rallying around Israel, he's been quoting the Bible kind of regular as he enters the next phases of his warfare in Palestine. So I'm letting him continue.
To genocide, and I will explain why shortly. So first, watch the video.
You must remember what Amalek has done to you, says our Holy Bible, and we do remember, and we are fighting our brave troops and combatants who are now in Gaza or around Gaza and in all other regions in Israel are joining this chain of Jewish heroes, a chain that has started 3,000 years ago from Joshua ben Nun until the heroes of 1948, the Six-Day War, the 73 October War, and all other wars in this country.
I'm going to stop there. He says a war that started 3,000 years ago. Now, them people over there now are Kazanazi Jews. They're from Russia. So to use the Bible in the Old Testament to justify what he's doing is sinister. You got to think about it. This is sinister. He's appealing to Christian doctrine.
Our hero troops, they have one supreme main goal: to completely defeat the murderous enemy and to guarantee our existence in this country. We've always said, never again. Never again is now.
Now, as you would have seen in that video, he explicitly refers to the Israeli troops who are now joining, quote, this chain of Jewish heroes.
The VA office is urging you or other veterans to sign up for this $1 billion program before it's too late. Only 20,000 claims have been filed compared to the 1 million estimated to be at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1987. That's a lot of service members and their families that may be at risk of missing out on a life-changing payout. Maybe the Camp Lejeune Justice Act seems too good to be true. After all, the act...
A chain that has started 3,000 years ago from Joshua bin Nun onwards. So who was Joshua? Why is he referring to these heroes, these biblical heroes, and what did they do? And why do we talk of genocide? Well, to set the scene, I want to share with you some passages from this book, Laying Down the Sword, Why We Cannot Ignore the Bible's Violent Verses by Philip Jenkins.
Now, I'm going to stop again and interject. And to the Christian people out there, y'all know that when Joshua went into Jericho, Joshua slayed the children, he destroyed the livestock, he destroyed men, women, grandparents. Everything was destroyed. Every person was destroyed by Joshua in Jericho. Think about what this guy is saying when he's using the Bible.
Now, Philip Jenkins is a distinguished professor of history at Baylor University's Institute of Studies of Religion. This is in Texas, I think. Very distinguished American historian. I think he was British originally. And he's written a great deal about the Bible's violent verses, the Amalekites, Joshua, and other things, which is really quite hair-raising if you're not familiar with it. And the way these passages have been used over the last 2,000 years by Christians and Jews to authorize and command genocide of whole peoples. It's shocking news. So I'm just going to read from a couple of passages, starting with page 5. And he contrasts, interestingly, Philip Jenkins, the Bible and the Quran, because often in the West, he says, and I quote now from him, many Westerners consider Islam to be a kind of dark shadow of their own faith, with the words of the Quran standing in vicious contrast to the scriptures they themselves cherish. In the minds of ordinary Christians and Jews, the Quran teaches warfare, while the Bible offers a message of love, forgiveness, and charity. For the prophet Micah, as a prophet in the Old Testament, God's commands to his people are summarized in the words, quote, to do justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with the Lord thy God. Christians recall the words of the crucified Jesus, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. But Professor Jenkins continues, but in terms of ordering of violence and bloodshed, any simplistic claim about the superiority of the Bible to the Quran would be wildly wrong. It's easy to see the mote in someone else's eye while missing the beam in your own. This is words from Jesus from the Sermon on the Mount, of course. In fact, the Bible has its own bloody and violent passages, which have troubled faithful readers for centuries and have attracted still more intense attention in recent debates over the relationship between religion and violence. Yet the Bible's dark passages are still nothing like as well known as they should be. Otherwise, Christians and Jews would not be so confident in denouncing the Quran as a militarist manifesto, supposedly a work of archaic savagery. The Bible overflows with texts of terror, as he calls it, texts of terror, to borrow a phrase coined by the American theologian Phyllis Tribble. And biblical violence is often marked by indiscriminate savagery. This is commandments by God, by the way, not just of sinners. And he'll demonstrate this and show this in some detail. One cherished psalm, these are the psalms allegedly of David, begins with the lovely line, by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. This is Psalm 137, of course. It ends by blessing anyone who would seize Babylon's infants and smash their skulls against the rocks. You could go and look at it for yourself, Psalm 137, the last verse. If the Quran urges believers to fight, as it undoubtedly does, it also commands that enemies be shown mercy if they surrender. Some frightful portions of the Bible, by contrast, order the total extermination of enemies, of whole families and races, of men, women, and children, even their livestock, with no quarter granted. Now, he doesn't refer to this passage, but he will know of it. And I just want to read to you one of these passages from my New Revised Standard Version translation. Chapter 1 Samuel 15, the first book of Samuel, chapter 15, verses 1 to 3. And this is where Saul defeats the Amalekites but spares their king. And Saul, of course, is the first king of Israel, and Samuel was a prophet. So Samuel said to Saul in verse, "The Lord sent me to anoint you king over his people Israel. Now, therefore, listen to the words of the Lord." This is not opinion of Samuel. This is the words of God, apparently. "Thus says the Lord of hosts, I will punish the Amalekites for what they did in opposing the Israelites when they came up out of Egypt."
I want you to think about that verse he just said, and think about the fact that Netanyahu is using the same storyline, same theory that he quoted about the Amalekites as he refers to the Palestinians, which begs the question, what is his intention? What is the intention of the West? And are they trying to shape the narrative that this is a holy war? Think about it.
And this has happened 300 years before, by the way, this story. So centuries earlier, the Amalekites opposed the Israelites. Now Samuel gives the words of the Lord to Saul, saying, I will punish them for what they did in opposing the Israelites. Now go and attack Amalek, in other words, the Amalekites, and utterly destroy all that they have. And do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, child and infant, ox, sheep, camel, and donkey. That's the end of verse 3. You can read the whole troubling chapter and the way Saul is rejected as king for not carrying out this.
It looks like the Fed has just declared war on Americans again. Because if they force us into a digital dollar, that means no.
This genocide to the very letter, because Saul let some people live. And this is seen as a disobedience and disqualifying Saul from being king because he didn't carry out the genocide thoroughly enough. So here we have the targeted extermination of men and women and children and babies, explicitly commanded, allegedly, by God himself in the Bible. So to continue reading then from Philip Jenkins' book, Laying Down the Swords, Why We Can't Ignore the Bible's Violent Verses, he continues. By the way, Philip Jenkins is a Christian. If you look him up on his Wikipedia site, he is a practicing Christian, teaching at a Christian university. He says, to continue, if Christians or Jews need biblical text to justify deeds of terrorism or ethnic slaughter, their main problem would be an embarrassment of riches. There are so many texts they could use to justify deeds of terrorism or slaughter that would be their main problem, he says. And of course, there's nothing like this in the Quran, as he's already stated. Is someone looking for a text to justify suicide terrorism? The Quran offers nothing explicit beyond general exhortations to warfare in the name of God. Some passages of the Bible, in contrast, seem expressly designed for this purpose. Think of the hero Samson, blinded and enslaved in Gaza, but still prepared to pull down the temple upon thousands of people. And he quotes here from Judges chapter 16, verse 30. And Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. And he bowed himself with all his might, and the house fell upon the lords and upon all the people that were therein. This is the men, the women, the children, everyone was killed. So the dead which he slew at his death were more than they which he slew in his life. Judges 16:30. The richest harvest of gore comes from the biblical books that tell the story of the children of Israel after their escape from Egypt, as they take over the new land of Canaan. And this is really important. I'll come back to this. Who are the people who live in Canaan, and what is their relationship with today's Palestinians? These events are foreshadowed in the book of Deuteronomy, in which God proclaims, I will make mine arrows drunk with blood, and my sword shall devour flesh. When we turn to the full orgy of militarism, enslavement, and race war in the books of Joshua and Judges, and by the way, Joshua is referenced by the Prime Minister of Israel, as we heard, Moses himself reputedly authorizes this campaign when he tells his followers that once they reach Canaan, they must annihilate all the peoples they find in the cities, especially reserved for the Hebrews. They should follow the terrifying rules of Haram warfare. That's H-E-R-E-M. Haram warfare is a Hebrew term meaning a ban where something is devoted to destruction. In other words, you kill everything. Under this code, every living thing found in the city, everything that breathes, should be slaughtered in a kind of mass human sacrifice, says Professor Jenkins. God commands, show them no mercy. Joshua, Moses' successor, proves an apt pupil. So Joshua, remember, is the example. Just read the words again from the Israeli Prime Minister. How Israeli troops are joining this chain of Jewish heroes, a chain that started 3,000 years ago from Joshua bin Nun onwards. And he cites other people. So it's explicitly referencing Joshua as a hero.
Just imagine the perfect small business that you could start. What would that look like?
Who, he is following in his footsteps. Show them no mercy. Joshua, Moses' successor, proves a good pupil. When Joshua, conquers the city of Ai, that's written A-I, he follows God's orders to take away the livestock and the loot while exterminating 12,000 inhabitants. These, of course, would be the men, women, and children of that place. When he defeats and captures 5 kings, he murders his prisoners of war, remember this Jewish hero, either by hanging or by crucifixion. If you want to read the story, go to the book of Joshua in the Old Testament, in the Jewish Bible, book of Joshua, chapter 8 and chapter 10, and you can read all about it there, this hero. If the forces of Joshua and his successor, Judges, had committed their acts in the modern world, observers would not hesitate to speak of war crimes, even genocide. Genocide. This is why I raised this issue. If the Israeli Prime Minister is referencing a Jewish hero in the chain, as he calls it, the chain of Jewish heroes, then he is in the same chain as someone who committed genocide. And we obviously have this war on Gaza at the moment. And we'll come back to this in a minute. The Bible's God, says Professor Jenkins, an esteemed distinguished historian in the United States, a specialist in this area. The Bible's God, moreover, shows no patience for those who resist the commands to slay. According to the first book of Samuel, God orders King Saul to strike at the Amalekite people, killing every man, woman, child, and animal. Remember, I've already read this, 1 Samuel 15, verses 1 to 3. Go and have a look at them. If you don't believe me, it's a command to kill children and babies and women and animals. And the problem is, though, for Samuel, that Saul fails to annihilate all of the enemy. And so he earns a scolding from the prophet Samuel, who himself slaughters and dismembers the Amalekite king Agag, A-G-A-G. Saul's sin, believe it or not, was failing to be sufficiently total in acts of massacre. And his reluctance led to his own destruction and the fall of his dynasty. That's why King Saul was, in a sense, taken, his blessing was removed from God, and King David replaced him. Why? Because he was not a sufficiently rigorous genocidal king. He didn't wipe out absolutely everything. And this was the problem. This was the sin, believe it or not. Later, with his regime in ruins, Saul summons the spirit of the now dead Samuel, who warns him that he is beyond saving. Why is Samuel beyond saving? Well, according to Samuel, why is Saul beyond saving? According to Samuel, because you did not obey the Lord or carry out his fierce wrath against the Amalekites. The Lord has done this to you today. So because he failed, and I quote here, to utterly destroy all of them, do not spare them, the Amalekites, but kill both man and woman, child and infant, ox, sheep, camel, and donkey. I'm not quite sure why the animals are in there. I'm not quite sure what wrongdoing they had committed, but hey, even the animals are slaughtered. By the way, in Islam, of course, there are explicit hadith of the Prophet, upon whom be peace, not to touch animals, not to kill animals, or even trees or fruit-bearing trees or crops, unless absolutely necessary for survival. So it's a very different ethic when it comes to animals in warfare and even the environment in warfare. In the Bible, it commands the complete destruction of the environment and livestock. Islam explicitly prohibits any unnecessary destruction of livestock and the environment. Very, very different indeed. And then Professor Jenkins goes on, later attempts to understand the slaughter of the Canaanites. Now, who are the Canaanites, by the way? And this is interesting. I read here from page 157 of the book, when he's asking whether the Palestinians today are in fact Canaanite in any scientific or ethnic sense. And he says, genetically, much of the Palestinian Arab population has local roots dating back to prehistoric times, and undoubtedly has some ancestry among the Canaanite peoples who occupied the land before Joshua.
Assalamu alaikum. If you're in a position where you want to leave your 9-to-5 job and have more money working from home,
as well as among older Jewish
I want you to think about what he said. He said that the Palestinians, a lot of them, are genetically and ethnically related to the Canaanites referred to in the Old Testament. So you got to really think about what Netanyahu was saying to the world and to the world of Christendom in the West as he proceeds to do what he do in Palestine. Check this out.
Populations. So today's Palestinians, to a greater or lesser extent, are the descendants of the Canaanite peoples who occupied the land before Joshua. So Joshua targeted this Jewish hero, according to the Prime Minister of Israel. Joshua targeted the ancestors of the Palestinians. One can see this horrific chain, shall we say, chain of slaughter going back from 3,000 years ago to today. So just to continue back to page 8, later attempts to understand the slaughter of Canaanites and Amalekites have parallels to theological discussions of the Holocaust. Not, of course, that the two are alike in historical terms. Even if the biblical stories are literally true, because he thinks they might not be, the numbers involved were minuscule compared to the mass killing of Jews and others in the 1940s. In other ways, though, the Canaanite story raises issues that are even thornier than the more recent events. In contemplating the Holocaust, believers struggle to explain how God could have let such horrors take place. In the ancient context, God commanded the bloodshed and intervened forcefully when it was not pursued with enough vigor. This is not a case of why do bad things happen to good people, but rather, why does God drive his people on to do worse and worse things to any people whatsoever? Now, I could go on. This book is full of horrific historical documented examples of how Christians and Jews have used the biblical texts, which are ignored today, the violent texts, have used these commandments to slaughter and enslave millions of people. The historical record is the most extraordinary religious history. I know of no other religion in the history of the world, Christianity mainly, but to a lesser extent Judaism, that's engaged in such systematic slaughter of men, women, and children, justifying their actions with biblical texts. So I think, well, there is more. Shall we go? I will share some more because I think it's worth having this on video. I'm now going to go to page 10. Sorry to share more, but we really need to understand what's going on here in Israel today, because many people are hearing what the Israeli Prime Minister is saying, and they know what he's talking about when he references the Amalekites, explicitly talking about them and biblical history in the Holy Bible. He's talking about people, heroes, who conducted genocide against the modern ancestors of the Palestinians. There's a direct parallel. And this is why I'm making this video. Is this a call to genocide by the Prime Minister of Israel?
I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna interject right here. You got to realize and think about this, because you live in America, which is a Judeo-Christian ethic, and a lot of people say, how can they justify the brutality of slavery, the brutality of apartheid that America supported? They justify all these atrocities by their interpretation of the Bible. They use those texts as a reference point. And what Bibi Netanyahu was doing when he quoted that, he deliberately quoted that to the world of Christendom to say that what he's doing is justified by the Bible. This is why you see the Christians in power will not come out against them, because they're following the same playbook. You know, just think of the Christian Knights of the Ku Klux Klan and different things that you've seen over the years. You got to pay attention. Got to pay attention.
I'll leave you to think about this and make your decision. However, I think the evidence points very ominously in one direction. And I just wish the BBC, Fox News, CNN, etc., would make this explicit. Why are not there journalists referring people to the Bible? Why are they not decoding this language, which many, many people in Israel will understand as referring to genocidal acts? Why are not people alarmed by this rhetoric? Why are not people raising the alarm bells and saying, why is the Prime Minister of Israel using genocidal references in reference to the modern descendants of the Amalekites, to the Palestinians who are descended directly, many of them, from the Canaanites? Why is no one raising the alarm in the West about this? I really don't know the answer to that question. There needs to be a forensic examination of what's going on here. But I will just conclude with a couple of paragraphs, even more sobering, from this book, which I do recommend you read. You want to be educated on what the Bible really teaches, not the saccharine text that today is carefully filleted out. The nasty bits are ignored or brushed aside, and only the nice spiritual bits are read to people in churches today. Evangelists and missionaries will only quote the nice verses. They will ignore page after page after page, chapter after chapter.
Okay, again, like I said, this was for fair use as a commentary. I'm gonna stop him there, but I wanted you to get the gist of what he's saying. This is not the first time that these people, the Christians and the Israelis, or whoever, have used religious doctrine to justify atrocities. And he came out the other day in front of the world and he called the Palestinians Amalekites, and he said that the heroes in his army are like Joshua. And we know that Joshua committed genocide. He killed men, women, children, babies. Got to think about what it is that you're hearing. If you care, you know what I mean? Are you seeing Armageddon? What are you really watching, or what are you really not paying attention to? So I'm gonna end right there on this, because he said a mouthful, and I want people to think about those texts he quoted and think about what you heard from Benjamin Netanyahu. So, signing to you out of Detroit. Keep your head on the swivel. Y'all better stay informed.